This meeting is being recorded.
Hello everyone, today our presentation about Unit 3 is a culture of the kingdom. The first one is about language. In the United Kingdom had no official language. The English is the de facto official language, spoken monolingually by an estimate about 95% of the UK population. But in some nations and regions in the UK have the framework for the promotion of the indigenous language. For example, in Wales, they speak English and Welsh. In Scotland, they speak English and Scottish Gaelic. And in the North Island, English and Irish were spoken by the people here. The second part is about art, and the first one is literature. The literature, the history of English literature was separate to a lot of area. And in areas, we have some remarkable word and remarkable author. For example, in 14th century, English literature emerged as a recognizable entities in the last 14 and a remarkable author is Geoffrey Chaucer, and his work is the Canterbury Tales. In the Elizabethan period is a golden time of the grammar and poems, and the most remarkable author is William Shakespeare. His work in Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. In the 18th century, novel became popular with two famous authors, Daniel Defoe, Robinson Crusoe, and Samuel Richardson with Pamela. Also in this century, the poetry of Robert Burns revived interest in the vernacular literature. In the Romantic period is a golden time of poets, and two most famous authors are William Blake and John Keats. In the Victorian period is a golden age of realistic English novel, and Jane Austen and Charles Dickens is the most famous author in this era. The next part is theater, and Leon will start presentation.
Hello, my name is Neon. I will continue my presentation, theater. Next. By the medieval period, theater has development with the number plays, a form of early street theater associated with the memory stand. Next. Memory stands are concerned stressing on them such as Saint George and the Garden and Robin Hood. This work foretells retelling old story, and the actor travel from town to town performing this for their audience in return for money and hospitality. Next. These are the famous play of that time. Okay, next. Renation theater as known as Elizabethan theatre, preferred to the Theatre of England between 1558 and 1642. William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Ben Jonson. This is the famous author of that time. Perhaps the most famous playwright in the world, William Shakespeare, wrote around 40 plays that are still performed in the theater across the world to this day. They include tragedies such as Hamlet, comedies such as A Midsummer Night's Dream and Twelfth Night, and history plays such as Henry. And the next. Restoration Theatre. England theatre were kept close by the Puritans for religious and ideological reasons. The London Theatre opened again in 1660. White and socially mixed audience were attracted by topical writing, new genres, heroic drama, pathetic drama, and restoration comedy. 18th century, the highbrow and provocative restoration comedy lose favor, replaced by sentimental comedy. Domestic Borges is dreaded and by an overwhelming interest in Italian opera. And the next. Of 19th century to present. First half of 19th century drama in London and provincial theatre has retreated. At the end of 20th century, Edwardian musical comedy came to dominate the musical stage. Today, the West End of London has a large number of theatres, particularly centered around Sainsbury's, about the music. And the next. The United Kingdom has been a major music producer, drawing inspiration from church music and traditional folk music. Britain also supports a number of major orchestras, including the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. The UK has one of two main countries in development of rock and roll, along with the UK, the United Kingdom. And the next. This is a famous composer at that time. You can see Sir Edward Elgar. And the next, this is the famous singer in 21st century. Next. Okay, continue with them. One.
Hello everyone, now I will continue my group presentation. I will talk about the broadcasting. So move to the first slide about broadcasting. Is a forefront of developments in films, radio, and television. And I will show you some famous main film production centers in the next slide. This is Shepperton Studio and Pinewood Studio is two main film production center in UK. And move to the next slide. It had historically been dominated by BBC, a large number of national and local radio stations, which cover a great variety of programming. And that's all for films, radio, and television. Now we move to the visual art. Move to the next slide. As you know, the oldest art in the United Kingdom can be dated to Neolithic period, and it found in the Funerary contest. And in the next slide, the Baker pupil arrived in Britain around 2500 BC, and they famed in skill in metal refining. And at the next slide, the witness culture excelled in making of gold ornaments, and word of art plays in great or sacrificial pigs have survived, and innovation include innovation and high skill. And into the next slide, in the Iron Age, the Celtic culture spread in British Isles. This style continued into the Roman period and medieval period. Into the next slide, we will talk about the Roman arriving in 1st century BC, brought with them the classical style. Many monuments have survived, especially for funerary monuments, statues, and boots. They also brought glasswork and mosaics. And move to the next slide, we will talk about in the 4th century, the new elements was introduced as the first Christian arts make in Britain. The style of Romanian British arts follow that of the continent, but they are also located specialities to some extent influenced by Celtic art. So now move to the next slide. We will talk about the Roman rules. This was replaced by a number of kingdoms with different cultural background. The Celtic Rite giant back some of power lost in the Roman period. Celtic style again become a factor influencing art all over Britain. Move to the next slide. We have theater, Jews, and dance brought with them Germanic and Scandinavian art style. Celtic and Scandinavian art have several common elements. Use of intricate intertwined pattern of decoration. Reasonable to say that Britain is the different style to some extent fused into British Celtic Scandinavian hybrid. So move to the next slide. We have Angel Saturn. Sculpting was outstanding for its time in 11th century. Christianity started to spreading among the peoples of Britain from the end of 6th century. The Celtic high crosses are well-known example of use of Celtic patterns in Christian arts. So in the next slide, we have Christianity provided in two elements, First one is monks who were familiar with the techniques, and the second is stone church with white jacket was suitable for murals. Another axe form introduced through the church was stand glass, which was also adopted for secular use. So move to the next slide. We have the English Renaissance starting in the early 16th century was parallel to the Italian Renaissance, but did not develop in exactly the same way. Many consonant with music and literature. In art and architecture, the genre was not as clearly defined as in the continent. At the next slide, we will talk about Sir Jacob Exton, a pioneer of modern sculpture, challenging taboos through his public works, and as a reaction to abstract expressionism, pop art emerged originally in England at the end of 1950s. So we will move to the next part. We have a lot of neighbor visual art from United Kingdom, such as John Constable, Sir Johnson Reynolds, and so on. And in the 20th century, we have Francis Bacon, David Hockney, and so on. You can see in the slide, there's a lot of famous work and famous author. So move to the next slide. We have two famous yarn printed artists is Daniel Hirst and Tracy Emin. And notable illustrator Albert Bursley, Roger Hartridge, and so on. So as the last slide, we have notable arts institutions. Next slide. Yes, and have a lot of famous notable arts institutions such as Royal Collective Art, Artists Museum, and all of them are in UK, located in UK. And move to the next slide, we will is the part of view.
Hello everyone. Now I will continue my team presentation about architecture. All people already knows. In England we have a lot of famous architecture. So now let's move on. We can see video. Yeah. The famous architecture in England is New York, right? All of we know. The architectures of the United Kingdom divide into many periods. The earliest remnants of architectures in the United Kingdom are many Neolithic monuments, such as the Stone Age, Ivory, Roman ruins. Yeah, next slide, please. Yes, so many castles remain from medieval periods, and most towns and villages, the parish church in an indication of the age of settlements, built from stone rather than traditional water and double. You can see the picture here. Here's the form for Stone Age and our. Yes, next slide, please. Over 2 centuries follow the Norman conquest of 1066 Tower of London. Caernarfon Castle in Wales, Carrickford Castle in Ireland were built to suppress the natives. Yes. The zero were from 1642 to 49 rove to the last time in British history that house had to survive a siege. Houses were built solely for living and design, and appearance were forever more important than defense. Prior to the Civil Wars, Palladian was imported by the famous architect. Yeah, here the pictures about the Queen House at Greenwich. It's a famous architecture that year. In the early 18th century, Baroque architecture, popular in Europe, was introduced, and Blenheim Palace was built in this area. Here's two pictures about Woburn Abbey and Kelliston's house. Now we move on. The famous architecture. In the early 19th century, the Romantic medieval Gothic style appears a black to the symmetry of palladiums. By the middle of the 19th century, as a result, construction were able to develop it, incorporating steel as a building component. One of the greatest exponents of this was Joseph Hazen. Yeah, here you can see the picture here, architect of Saito Palace. Yes, after the Second World War, the architecture in the UK changed a lot. Following the Second World War, reconstruction went through a variety of phases, but was heavily influenced by moderns, especially from the late 1950s to the early 1970s. In the immediate post-war years, many thousands of cursive houses in vernacular style were built, giving working class people their first experience of private garden and yeah. So you can see here the Newton principles is one of the most influenced mathematics which was in the history of science. Ever since the scientific revelation, the United Kingdom has been prominent in world scientific and technological development. This method remote in Paris and induction in scientific inquiry and was one of the driving forces behind the scientific revolution. Yeah, next slide, please. Now, I know maybe already most of you know the person here is Isaac Newton, and the famous science from him is gravity. We talk about science and technology. Isaac Newton here is he also knows famous as a father of classical mechanics, formulates as history laws and as the co-inventor of differential calculus. Less famously, he also created the binomial theorem, work extensively on optics and create a law of Calling. Here are two famous science is Michael Faraday, who with James Clerk Maxwell and find the electric and magnetic force in what are now known as Maxwell equation. James Joule is also the famous scientist in that time, who worked extensively in thermodynamics and is often credited with the discovery of the principle of conservation of energy. Uh, Technologically, in the UK is also among the world's leaders. Historically, it was at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution, with innovation, especially in textile, the steam engines and railroad, and civil engineering. Famous physicists, engineers, and inventors from this period include James Watt, Robert Stephenson, December Kingdom, Wilner. Next slide, we will talk about religions. My and in you will continue my team presentations.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Nhi, and now I will continue my group presentation. Now I will tell you about the religions. Yeah, the United Kingdom is traditionally a Christian country. Two of the home nations having official faith, Anglicanism is in the form of the Church of England, in the established church in England. The Queen is supreme governor of the Church of England. Presbyterianism, Church of Scotland, is the official faith in Scotland. The Anglican Church in Wales was established in 19 and 20. The Anglican Church of Ireland was established in 18 and 71. Yeah. And the next, other religions is Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, Judaism, and Buddhism. 2004 YouGov poll found that 44% of UK citizens believe in God, and while 35% do not. Yeah, and the next is I will talk about the food of United Kingdom. So the 18th and 20th century Britain reputation of somewhat conservative cuisine. The native cuisine were of diet consisting of meat and two veg. Yeah. Traditional British fare usually include items such as fish and chips. So this picture is fish and chips. And the next. For roast dishes of beef, lamb, chicken, and pork, both sweet and savory peas, as well as regional dishes such as the Cornish party and Lancashire hotpots. And this is this picture is Cornish pastry and Lancashire hotpot. Sunday roast consisting of roast beef, roast potatoes, vegetables, and Yorkshire pudding. The next slide, please. a new style of cooking called modern British emerged. British taste filled with the new dishes to produce entirely new dishes such as the bounty, an English invention based on Indian cuisine that has gained popularity across the world. Foreign secretary Robin Cook described chicken, tikka masala as a true British national dish. Yeah, and so thanks for your attention.